expedite the day in advance of the weather.
Fantastic.
Which, right now, you would never accuse of being anything but spectacular.
I know.
This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and on today's show, I'm going to do something a little bit different than normal. And today's show isn't going to be entirely about sim racing. Now, a person could say that sim racers are just like any other gamer out there. However, I would say that for most of us, it goes a lot deeper than just our gaming experience when it comes to our sim racing. In fact, it comes more to being all about gearheads or motorsport kind of people. We're into auto racing, we're into car clubs, we're into upgrading our own automobiles or working on them in the performance aspects of real life. And another thing for a lot of us is wanting to drive a real race car. This could be go-karts, this could be local track stuff, or this could even be a dream of being a Formula One racer one day. And for me, all of those hobbies are true. And if I were to make a personal bucket list, it would be the opportunity to go from track to track, driving every different type of race car or exotic car that I possibly could. I mean, if I won the lottery, it's safe to say that's all I do, is just travel around, getting an opportunity to drive in any scenario that I possibly could. Now, winning the lottery isn't a very good goal, and it's not a very realistic way to go after one's dreams. But for us gearheads, our motorsports fiends, there is a way for us to get a taste of the action, and that's by going to one of the many different racing schools all throughout the world. You can find schools that specialize in nearly every aspect of racing, and even those who favor exotic cars. The prices usually can be from fairly affordable for a taste of the action up to endless amounts of money. We are talking about racing here after all. Now, for a long time I've been looking for a modern racing experience in a Formula type open-wheeled car. My friend John Hill, who's on the show from time to time, he recently got to do one of those experiences, and I went along with him to Fontana. He attended the Allenburg Racing School, and when I was there, I got to reconnect with Allenburg, who I've known for many a year. It was great to reconnect with him, and it was also great to see John go through one of these type of one-day programs, see him learn how to get into the car, see him get up to speed, and see him finally get out there and do some hot lapping. So after a bit of dialogue with Alan at that event, he decided it'd be really cool to see what a sim racer like me could do in one of his cars without any real practice in advance. So he set it up. He was going to have some courses going on at the Arizona Motorsports Park coming up, and he offered me one of those seats. So the next thing you know, me and John were on our way to Arizona for me to try out one of these F1600 cars. Now, the drive to Phoenix is easily one of the most boring drives anyone could face on this earth. You literally head out from Los Angeles, drive 5 or 6 hours through the desert to the east. You are driving through sand, through low brush, through cactuses. Randomly, there'll be a casino, or all of a sudden there'll be a million windmills gathering power. These are the only things that actually break up the monotony of the brutal drive that it is from Los Angeles to Phoenix. But a long drive later, we were there. A good night's sleep, and the next thing you know, we're on our way to the track. Now, I'm going to tell you, driving up to a track, regardless of why you're going, it's a euphoric experience for me. I've been to several of them, and each time when I get nearer, I can feel the excitement building up inside of me. It's one of those moments that gives me goosebumps. It raises the hair on my arms, on my legs, and up my back. It's so exciting for me. Now, on this day, as we approached Arizona Motorsports Park, and sitting there gleaming in the sun was a racing hauler for True Speed Racing with a few Formula cars in the distance. And I think to myself, this is all there for me. Well, mostly for me. This is a very special day indeed. Now, before we go further, let's talk a little bit about the Allenburg Racing Schools. Like a Skip Barber and Jim Russell, which are both schools bearing the name of a retired driver, Allenburg is actually the main instructor at the Allenburg Racing School. And for those of you who might not know Allenburg, he was a very competitive F3 racer in the early 80s, and despite running in the shadows of Brundle and Senna, he was able to lock down a ride in Formula One for the 1986 season with the Osella racing team. After retiring from racing, he went on to do some driver coaching and eventually to the starting of his racing schools. Now, the Allenburg Racing School is an open-wheeled Formula-style racing program. They run their schools in the Southwest United States, running at tracks like Fontana, Willow Springs, or in my case, Arizona Motorsports Park. Now I want to talk about the car they use at Allenburg. It's pretty darn close to an F1600 race car. The main difference is they also have a front and rear wing that makes them look more like an F2000 from here in the States. The car is a full monocoque carbon fiber chassis that is built by the Italian manufacturer Tatus. They are equipped with a Renault 1.6-liter inline-4 that produces about 140 horsepower and has a 5-speed sequential transmission attached to it, and the package can take you from 0 to 60 in about 3.8 seconds. The car utilizes push-rod suspension just like you would find on any Indy car or Formula One car. The car has very good power-to-weight ratio, runs on slicks, and is a very fine piece of machinery. So after a little time to check out the hauler, do some paperwork, take a look at the cars as they are being prepped for our day, it was time to get the drivers suited up. Each of us was given a red Allenburg driving suit, a pair of gloves, shoes if we needed them, and a helmet if we needed them as well. While we were all getting suited up, one of the instructors named Lou, he took a moment to give us all a little bit of words of wisdom. These are the kind of things that you need to hear just before you get into a race car or even into a sim rig for that matter.
It is important that from now moving forward, we start to kind of gather our thoughts a bit, okay? We, as a society, live in a world of ABB, right? We hone and polish that skill on a regular basis. From the moment we wake up, we bust out our phones, we're checking emails, doing 20 things at once, okay? It's important, extremely important. From now moving forward, you guys are able to harness whatever energy is brought with you, be it calm energy, nervous energy, talkative energy, whatever energy it is that you brought with you, harness that and turn that into focus. Okay?
There were 8 of us total, a group of 4 who had been through the one-day program prior, and then the rest of us, the first-timers. Now the A group, they were taken over the cars, put into the cars, and sent out on track. For us, the B group, it was into the air-conditioned hauler's meeting room for a little bit of instruction from Allenburg himself. And to be honest with you, as many times as I had tried to teach the basics in simple ways, Allen was the master, and I will be stealing his methods for teaching. But things started off with the basics of the vehicle, how to turn it on, start it up, and so that you could know what all the other buttons and switches do. They explained the Motec dash and what we would be looking at or paying attention to versus ignoring. From there, it was some instruction on getting the car up to speed, how to slow it down, and then a lesson on heel-toe downshifting. From there, he went on to what we would be doing on the track and what we could expect. And then he sent us over to one of the other instructors for him to give us our first close-up look at these cars. Now, he first got into the car, showed us how to get in, how to work with the seat belts, how to get buckled up, and everything else. He then went back through all of the switches on the car, all of the dash displays, and everything we needed to know from the cockpit. A few minutes later, we piled into a minivan and Allenburg took us for a few laps around this track. He showed us the turn-in points, he showed us the apexes, he showed us the braking zone, he showed us the basic driving line of the Arizona Motorsports Park. Now this track is a 2.3 mile track and it can be divided into 2 halves, each measuring 1.13 miles long. We would be running the west course with 7 corners. They had placed cones on the track to help us with those turn-in points, hitting the right apexes, and even the drifting out point when it came to ending the corners. So from there, after driving the track in the van with Allen, it was time for us to head over to our cars. We were each assigned our own car for the day, and it was time to get buckled in. Once our group was ready, they were going to send us out behind a Mustang in our order. No passing, keep 3 to 5 car lengths, and if we showed competence, they're going to slowly bring us up to speed. At this point, Allenburg wanted us to really focus on our heel-toe downshifting and our racing line. Now at these speeds, I found driving the racing line no problem at all. However, without being able to apply a lot of brake pressure, I had a little difficulty with the heel-toe downshifting. So I actually spent most of this 30-minute session really looking for that driving line and looking for things that made me feel what the car was really doing. There were times I was giving it a little extra steering just to see what it felt like when I went beyond the slip angle of the car. Sometimes I'd leave a little gap, speed up in order to slam on the brake a little harder just to see what kind of twitchiness I got out of the car. I was really searching for the behavior of the car, and as much as focusing on the driving line and the heel-toe downshifting, I wanted to know what this car really felt like. After that, we piled back into the classroom for the day, and Allenburg took us through part 2 of what we had to learn about these cars. There was a lot more emphasis on braking zones, turn-in points, hitting apexes, carrying speed, and even letting the car run out. All of these things impacting your lap times. He did a great job of explaining all of that kind of stuff to us. There was a lot of talk about slip angles, both front and rear, and what to do if you went beyond any of those slip angles and started to spin the car or started to push the car too much. He told us all of the tricks and all the behavior that the F1600 is known for. And then after that, it was right back out into the cars for another session of lead and follow with that Mustang. This time, the Mustang picked up at about 85% of where we left off speed-wise from the first session. And he went right to that and kept going. Now, our group of 4 guys, these guys all could drive. You had some history of drivers here, and we were right up to speed right away. And each lap, you could tell the Mustang was going a little bit faster, a little bit faster. And towards the end of that 30-minute session, I could tell from driving behind it that we had gotten to the limits of what this Mustang could even do. You were seeing so much sway from the car through the left-right sections. You could hear it in the tires, you could see it in the car, and it finally got to the point where they were even getting a left wheel off on the final back section braking zone. A little bit sketchy for the Mustang, I'm sure. And that was pretty much the limit of what that car could do, leading out these really incredible formula machines. So we closed out that 30-minute session doing exactly that. Doing lead follow, really working on the heel toe shifting at that point and our driving line.
Yeah.
Hey, how was it?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, nothing like it. I haven't had a chance to race in a real track. It's all been virtual racing, so this is completely different. It can pretty much better. Calling because of the rain.
You ever did go-karts or anything?
Yeah, well, yeah. I wouldn't count that as a real racetrack, though.
Yeah. So you're still going to go back out again, right, by yourself?
Yeah,
I mean, like
we got
not following
in a couple minutes. Thank you. Later on in the afternoon.
Now normally this is when we would take a lunch break. However, there was bad weather on the horizon, so they were keeping us at a very high pace this day, in particular trying to get it all done before the bad weather. So we were in a race of sorts while we went. So for us, it was right back to the classroom, because the next time we headed out, it was going to be an open hot lapping session, just our 4 cars on the track, no Mustang setting the paces. So Alan wanted to go over the rules of the track, the flags, knowing what to do when you come upon another car. They were going to allow for open passing, but it was only going to happen on one straight after one corner with a blue flag letting the forward driver know there was someone coming up behind him. This is all in preparation of really turning us loose and hoping that we actually brought these fine cars back to pit lane. And as he was finishing up, in came the rain. Now at the time, the A group was out on track on slick tires, so they were immediately brought in to see how things would go. And after a short time, it was obvious the rain was here to stay. So they were changed over to rain tires and sent back out to finish their 30-minute session. Now for us, it meant back into the classroom, because there's not going to be an open hot lapping. We are now being switched from slicks to rain tires, and that changes everything. So now we need to know, what are we going to do in the rain? We have to know the rain driving line. And of course, we're going to be sent back out, lead follow behind the Mustang to see how our group does. So a few minutes later, we're getting into the cars, and here's the weird thing. All of a sudden it turned back into sunny skies and what looked like a drying track. So once again, we had to hold. We're sitting there on rain tires. The track's now looking dry. If we go out, it's just going to eat these tires up right away. So we're now in that holding pattern and waiting to see what the weather will do. Now eventually the bad weather came back, and it came back ferocious. So they gave us some umbrellas to hold. I mean, this is one of those experiences like in a Formula One car. I'm holding an umbrella, just waiting on the green flag to drop. As soon as we got a little bit of break in the weather, we'd have a wet track, cars are set up, and we are going to be sent out on that lead follow behind the Mustang. When we went out behind the Mustang, I was the first one in line at this point, and the visibility was impossible. I really don't know how Formula One guys drive in the rain at those speeds right on the tail of another car. I mean, it's one thing for the guy out in front, but for everybody else, the visibility is literally zero. The only thing I could see was a little bit off of the track or kind of a blur of something out in front of me. There was no chance of being able to see the car clearly ahead of me, no chance of being able to see my braking zones. You were going by memory of the track more than anything else, and it is a little bit scary. You'll find yourself swerving out of the draft of another car. You'll find yourself constantly wiping your face mask. It is a little bit different, but it can be a lot of fun. We're on these incredible cars that have great handling, rain or shine. We're on rain tires. These are tires that are made for driving on a wet track. And quite honestly, you could push these cars quite a bit everywhere except for heavy braking and heavy throttle situations. Now our group was once again carrying a pretty good speed for in those wet conditions, and it allowed the Mustang driver to keep pushing a little bit more each lap. And we soon were going at a pretty good pace under these wet conditions. I was so chomping at the bit at this moment to really get going that I was flying right behind that Mustang. I could actually feel the exhaust from the car coming over the front of the car, over my helmet and shoulders. It was something I've never experienced before. I could also even smell the tires. We're in the wet, but I could still smell the tires from that Mustang directly in front of me. So we kept doing this until we got faster and faster, and then eventually the Mustang took us down pit lane. And that's when we were given a last-minute warning. If our group could maintain this composure without anybody pacing us, they're going to let us go ahead and do our hot lapping session starting right now. But this was a tall order. This is 4 guys. Now, realistically, you had the guy from MAV TV, Kurt. He was a pretty known driver and has lots of experience. There was another guy there who also had a lot of experience. You had the kid there who was actually a little bit green, and then you had me. But our group collectively was doing well enough that they had confidence to put us out there. So soon enough, I was the lead car out, and I went like a madman. Clear, open track, still a little bit wet, but not sopping wet, and I could really see what this car could do in some mediocre driving conditions. I picked up the pace right where the Mustang had let off and started to exceed that just a little bit. I wanted to see exactly what it could do under maximum braking. I wanted to see what it could do under a little bit more cornering speed. I wanted to feel what it felt like when I got a little bit loose or when I locked them up and got a little bit tight. And it wasn't long before I started getting all of those sensations. I also found out how ferocious 140 horsepower can be when giving it a little bit too much throttle coming out of a corner. I was instantly having one of the best times of my life, and I just kept pushing it a little more each lap. And I definitely had a few of those oh shit moments, but each of them were gathered up easily and I carried on quickly. It was only a matter of laps before I caught the first car out on track, and like I mentioned earlier, they are only allowing for passing in one spot, and they had to have a blue flag. So the advice I was given was close up on them so the flag marker knew that you were there ready to make a pass and they were going to give that flag, but don't put it right on their gearbox or you're not going to be able to get enough momentum to go by. So the passing zone was immediately following turn 1. I would usually leave about 3 to 5 car lengths between me and the car ahead coming out of the final couple corners, and just before that turn 1 I would start to come around with a little bit of speed knowing they're going to get that blue flag. As soon as we both saw it, I was going to be able to carry on through corner 1 and make a pass. I'll admit I was probably pushing it a little bit because I think we were supposed to wait for the straightaway, and sometimes I was so chomping at the bit that I was hard on the gas coming out of the corner. In the end, I was the fastest car on the track and ended up lapping each of the other cars 2 or 3 times. Each lap I pushed a little bit harder. If I had no grip issues in a corner, it meant that I could go just a little bit faster. On the corners that I was having trouble getting grip coming out of the corners, I kept searching for a slightly different line. I literally was taking the car about 6 inches out each time, seeing if there was more grip and so that I could carry more speed and not have that throttle oversteer that you're going to get when driving in the wet conditions. I kept pushing, and each lap I had more confidence, went a little bit faster, felt better with the car, had more knowledge of what it would do, and kept going faster, and by the end of the day I felt really good about the lap times that I was setting in these wet conditions. Despite being sideways at times, I'm going to be the first one to admit that I was pushing it pretty hard. But you know what? I had total confidence in myself, total confidence in the machinery beneath me. And after the session, the guy from MAV TV, who I did lap 2 or 3 times, kind of gave me a little bit of hard time saying, hey, we're both media guys, and I didn't want to be that guy and bring our session to an end. But that didn't happen to either of us in the end. So from there, it was time for us to eat a really quick lunch, and I wasn't 3 bites into my sandwich when all hell broke loose. Rain started coming from everywhere. And then it started to rain harder and harder and harder. We all had to run to the hauler for cover, and this was followed by 50-mile-an-hour winds. Meanwhile, you have all of the Allenburg gear out on the track. You have easy ups, you have race cars, you have tires, you have all the pads, helmets, things everywhere. And these winds are just launching things everywhere. And we had to stay inside the hauler just to be protected. You had thunder, lightning, and this incredible wind, rain, and even a little bit of hail. So we're all soaking wet, hiding out in the hauler. The staff at Allenburg kept telling us this track has great drainage, so let's just ride it out, see what happens. But the rain just kept coming, even got worse. So did the winds, so did the thunder and lightning. And eventually it got to the point where they let us know there was no way we're gonna be able to make it back on track. But at this point, you couldn't even leave. You were stuck in this hauler. And eventually the rain did pass. And when we came out, you could see that one of the easy ups had completely been disintegrated. They had moved the cars at the last second under a covering, but you could see they had just been completely pelted with rain. The other easy up had been launched like a kite, it and its 5-gallon cement buckets, and it actually hit John Hill's car, rolled over it, and I'll tell you, there's not a panel that doesn't have a scratch, a ding, including the windows, but nothing actually broke, which was a little bit lucky, but this was the end of our day. Now, under normal circumstances, at that moment after that 3rd session, we would have gone back into the hauler, into that meeting room, and we actually would have looked at the data that came off of our cars. We as drivers were going to be able to sit down with the instructors, look at our driving line compared to one of the better drivers from the day. This is all going to happen, rain or shine, just not during a monsoon. We would then be able to look at our throttle position, our steering input, the way that we are driving our car, and compare it to a better driver so that we could hopefully make improvements when we went back out for our 4th session, which was going to be another 30-minute hot lapping session, which unfortunately we weren't going to be able to do this day. So at the end of the day, despite being robbed of one of our sessions, I did feel very satisfied with the outcome of the way things went. I had one of the greatest driving experiences of my life. In fact, I got to experience a few things that very few people in real life racing will ever get to experience. Things like being able to run in the rain. That is not an everyday privilege, and for some people, I think they would have said, oh, it's raining, what a bummer on my one day at a school. For me, this was an opportunity. This was an opportunity to do something that very, very few people get to do, and I really had a lot of fun doing it. And no, I didn't get to go as fast I would have liked, but I got to show a different kind of car control that goes well beyond normal when it comes to driving. I also got that rare experience of being gridded up, waiting for the weather to change. This happens to real life racers all the time. Sitting there, is it gonna go dry? Is it gonna go wet? Are they gonna go green? Are we gonna be delayed to the next day? These are real life racing experiences. When you pay for a school, you're just hoping for a driving opportunity. Not really to get some of these sensations. For me, this was a little bit of icing on the cake. I've only been to one other full-size car racing school in my lifetime. I did the 3-day program at the old Jim Russell Racing School. I've also talked to people who've been through similar programs. Now, the one thing I'm going to say about the Allenburg Racing School is their equipment is top-notch. Their racing staff is small, but very dedicated and very knowledgeable. And their operation resembles a real racing team. The instructions that you're given come from a real Formula 1 driver, and he has one goal, and that's getting you up to speed, getting you in the car, and getting you going quickly fast. There is no time wasted with braking drills, with slalom courses. This is what you need to know to drive this car. This is what you need to do to drive this car fast, and that comes from Allenburg directly himself. It's very direct, it's almost one-on-one or one-on-4, and anytime you had a question, Alan instantly could answer exactly what you wanted to know about this car and about driving or racing. I'm actually kind of blown away. Had there been no rain, I actually, after 1 hour of driving, would have been turned loose in, what, an $80,000 or $100,000 race car and say, here, do what you can do in this car. And that is really, really loosening the reins very quickly, and that is a real driving or racing experience that you can get at very few schools. And enough laps in the car to wear most people out. Now for me, this was an experience of a lifetime, and I cannot wait to do it again. Allenburg mentioned he still owes our group one session, and I'm definitely going to take him up on that one day. Now for me, this was a great opportunity, it's a great story, but most important, it reminded me something so important as a racer, something I talk about, but it's really hard to slap yourself in the face and remind you the level of concentration that it requires. When you're being given a $100,000 race car and you can take all of that damage or all that value on track for yourself, when you take your personal life at risk getting into a car, I'm going to tell you, it's pretty hard to forget what you're doing and forget how important everything you do with your car is. It could be your life, it could be your wallet for a lifetime that you have to pay for. Now in sim racing, it's so easy to forget that. And I'm going to tell you, Lou mentioned it. I showed you the clip of what he talked about concentration. And in a car, it's so easy to get that level of concentration. But as a sim racer, we need to be able to hone in on it. And doing this driving skills definitely reminded me and is going to make it easier when I get into my rig to take it that much more seriously. I do want to thank Allenburg for this opportunity. I also want to thank his staff for being so wonderful and making this a day to remember for a lifetime. If you'd like more information on the Berg Racing School and the program I ran, I do have the links in the description of this video. I hope you've enjoyed this show today. If you have any questions or comments, please post them at our website. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.
More about Fancho.
Well, aside from a great driver, a great person, he was extremely intelligent. And I remember a passage from a book. They did an interview on him, and there was an accident. I can't remember the track, somewhere in Europe, obviously, in Formula One. And there was a pileup coming out of a 90-degree corner, actually a fast corner. And there was a pileup there. And when he came, he was the only one out of all the cars when he slowed down. And after the race, they asked him, they said, well, why did you slow down? I mean, you didn't know there was an incident there. And he said, well, every time I get there, I see the reflection of the grandstand being like a white reflection, like from the faces of the spectators. This time, it wasn't white, it was dark, which was the back of their heads, which told me they were looking at something on the other side of the turn. And that's how we avoid the accident. Very smart person, very, very nice.
That's a great story. What's the biggest stunt you've done?
Biggest stunt that I did was not for a film or movie or anything, it was just for fun. But
yeah.
I did a flip in a car, got to press a button that detonated a ram system that hits the ground and it flips the car over, and got to do 3 rolls on that one.
But it wasn't for a film?
No, that was just for fun. I was just trying to learn how to do it, and that's the only way you learn. So.
You had to trash a car, so what car were you using?
It was used, the car that I used was used on a television show, and they flipped it and it did one rollover. And so it was still fine, so we just took it and did it again.
So the system was in place and you got a chance to check it out.
Right, exactly. So.
What movies have you done stunts for?
I did one on circuits. I did a T-bone crash for that. Worked on MI4, MI5, the new one is coming out next year. Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. That one's coming out actually next week. But yeah, I've got a pretty long list of stuff, but I've been in some recent stuff. And,
You want to go?
yeah. But,